today. Do I need a tax attorney or a CPA, and how do I find one? Well, so more of the question, tax attorney versus CPA, when do you need which? Do you need both? Does it matter if they are local to you in your state, etc.? Also, what are a few things you can look at or questions to ask when looking for a competent tax attorney or CPA or advisor to fit your needs? Well, first of all, there's kind of four major classifications in tax. There are CPAs. They're licensed accountants. They are typically focused on compliance and preparation. They often handle tax filing. They also often do things like bookkeeping, payroll, etc. They may do basic entity setup, but I would be really careful if they're doing anything more complicated than a simple LLC or a one owner S corp. Uh, they can legally do planning, but most don't. My experience is maybe 1% of CPAs do planning. That said, I some of the best tax planners I know are CPAs. I have learned a lot from several CPAs who do this. They are not a lawyer, so no attorney-client privilege applies. Then there are EAs, enrolled agents. This is an IRS designation. Anybody can go take a test and become licensed to file taxes. And then they typically do much what a CPA does. Again, they file taxes. They often do bookkeeping or payroll. Again, they can do planning. Most of them don't. Fewer than the CPAs in my experience, but it does happen. And again, I know at least one enrolled agent who is a tax planner who is quite good at what he does. He specializes particularly in helping in lawyers and helping lawyers save money on taxes. Then there's attorneys, and a tax attorney is just an attorney who has a specialized or a particular knowledge of tax law. Uh, they're often focused on legal strategy, audit defense, and litigation. One of the benefits of an attorney is they can give you privileged advice, and this is particularly helpful if you want to skate close to the edge or if something has already gone sideways. And they're most often used in tax controversy cases, or advanced entity structuring or estate planning. Most of the time, if somebody says looking for a tax attorney, what is really going on is either they want to sue the IRS, or they're being sued by the IRS, or there's criminal charges filed on them by the IRS. So where does a tax planner fit into all these things? Well, it's not a license, it's a function. A tax planner could be a CPA, could be an attorney, could be an EA, could be a combination of several. I know one CPA attorney who's also a tax planner. Technically, you can probably be a tax planner without being any of those things, but I certainly wouldn't hire anybody who hasn't gone through some sort of a process to be able, legally be able to file your taxes and to understand your taxes. The planner's job is to look forward, to reduce future taxes, not just report what already happened. So it's not a license, it's a skill set. And basically, you need to ask whether someone does planning, not just filing, to find them. Now, when would you maybe need any of these? You know, first of all, you don't need any of these if you're a regular W-2 guy making $100,000, nothing special. Um, But if you make enough money, if you're busy enough, hiring a CPA makes a lot of sense to, you know, help with your tax prep. If you have just a basic side hustle making $10,000, $20,000 a year, it's great to have a CPA. They're great to help you with your bookkeeping. Um, most of them will do some basic retirement contribution planning. So they're really great for the basics, and they're really great for just getting your taxes filed on time. Uh, And an EA, again, is totally going to be fine for most of that as well, and usually will be cheaper. So look around for an EA instead of a CPA. Um, when you need a tax attorney when you're being audited or penalized, or if you get a letter from the IRS saying you owe 50 or 60 or $100,000, that's when you need a tax attorney, but not just any tax attorney is going to be able to help you with those things. You're going to want to look specifically for things like audit defense attorney or tax remediation for that sort of thing. Because while I'm an attorney, I don't handle any of those things other than for my pre-existing clients. You're also going to want an attorney and maybe a tax attorney, or maybe just an attorney and a tax professional if you're setting up any really advanced legal structures, like a complex trust, if you're doing multi-entity stacking, if you have offshore arrangements, you're going to want an attorney involved in that. Another reason to have a tax attorney, if you want privileged advice that The IRS is never going to get their hands on. If they're auditing you, you want a tax attorney. So think more legal exposure on that sort of a thing. Now, when do you need a tax planner? Well, if you're earning over $300,000 a year as a W-2 earner, uh, as a married couple, or $200,000 as a single person, you should probably look into it. Anywhere from $100 to $150,000 as a business owner is where you start looking into it, and that's net profit on the business, not gross. Um, if you own, five, six, seven, eight rental properties, or if you own multiple LLCs, or if you own an S corp and aren't really sure what you're doing, that's a good time to talk to a tax planner. And if you just had a windfall year or are going to sell an asset other than your primary residence, it's a really good idea to do that. I just helped somebody who sold a business, and he was looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital gains. And, I couldn't get rid of all of that, but by doing some planning, we saved him over $100,000. And, if he had contacted me before he sold the business, I probably would have saved him closer to $200,000. So also again, if you have a windfall year, hey, most years I make $150,000, but this year I'm going to make 300. Well, that's when tax planning can be a great thing to do. One of my early clients was somebody who, because of 2020, made a lot of money, way more money he had ever made before, probably way more money he would ever make again. That was a great year for tax planning. Does location matter? Not particularly. So for a CPA, local, and for any of these, like if you have state-specific matters, it can be helpful. Um, if you want something other than tax advice, it's more important. But if you're just looking for tax, most of the things we're worried about is federal taxes. So as long as they're licensed federally, you don't really care. For a tax attorney, you don't really need a local person unless you're in litigation or dealing with state law. And again, that would be state litigation or state law. Now, again, there are times that people come to me and say, "Hey, can you help me set up an LLC?" Well, I can't do that other than a state I'm registered in. So there are limits to what I can do based on my licensing, but that's the type of thing, I mean, frankly, LegalZoom or Corporate Direct are great for that. So there are workarounds. For tax planners, in generally go where the value is. Remote planning is very normal and very effective. Yes, if you have a super, super complicated situation and you're in California or New York City, you might want to find somebody in California or New York City who specializes in those issues. But if you're somebody with kind of a normal tax situation, normal business, normal life, I help people in every state and I do a good job of it. I always factor in the state taxes, and I do different plans depending on what will work in the state or not. So because I'm licensed in the federal courts, I'm allowed to give you st some state tax advice as well and help you out there. So the real question isn't where are they? It's A, can you work with them remotely? Are you comfortable doing that? I've had, unfortunately, two clients in the past year I've had to withdraw from because they were not comfortable working remotely with me through digital tools. Are they going to be strategic? Are they going to be proactive? And can you understand what the hell they're saying? Some questions before you hire really any tax pro, just to make sure you know what's going on. Again, a good question is, do you do planning or just tax prep? And if they say they do planning, make sure they do tax prep because I did not do tax prep for several years. I had one client who thought I did. I told him I didn't, but he had misunderstood, and we had a misunderstanding. So ask what they do. And then when they say they do planning, ask what they mean. If they say, "Oh, we make sure your 401k is right and your solo or your IRA and your HSA," ask them about a little more. Ask them about, well, what about entity formation? What about anything regarding, hiring my kids or hiring my wife or anything like that? Do you do any planning like that? If they can't give you some basic answers to that and they say they do planning, I would run away because they're just lying to you. Um, you know, ask, do you work with people at my income level or complexity level? There are a lot of CPAs who really specialize in, certain castes of people. So if 90% of their people are 70 to $100,000 W-2 returns, they're probably not ready to help you with your $600,000, business. Similarly, somebody who specializes in helping with that $600,000 business may not be a great person to help with a $50,000 W-2 tax return. I know multiple CPAs who specifically only work with businesses. And as a tax planner until this year, I only worked with businesses because that was what I understood well enough to help. I now know more. But again, knowing who they work with is a really good question. Um, Ask who prepares the actual strategy. You don't want to pay somebody thousands and thousands of dollars and get a cookie cutter advice from some junior associate or even worse, an AI tool. Now, I use AI tools in my practice, and about 30% of the time, the stuff I get from them is garbage. So you want somebody who is really giving you a specific plan for you, for your actual strategy, and you want to know who's actually doing it. Ask if they can explain it to you without, in just regular human language. And maybe again, ask for an example. And if they can't explain something to you to where you can at least mostly follow along, you probably shouldn't work with them. Now, I'll be honest, some of the tax strategies I use, they're very complicated. You're not going to understand it probably the first go round, but you should at least get the basics of it. Why does this work? Not the tax code that says it works, but kind of what are the nuts and bolts of it. The final question I would ask them is, do you collaborate with other professionals? Tax strategy, you really need a team for it once you're big enough. So, whether you're working with a CPA or an attorney or a tax planner, you want to know if they know other legal people, other people in accounting, financial partners. Heck, I'll be very honest. I have referred multiple people to other CPAs in the past year because they were not people who were good fits for me. Either they didn't make enough money or they had tax remediation issues. So, ask them, hey, do you work with other people? Do you send people to other people when they're not a good fit? Maybe even ask who those people are. Um, Couple of very common mistakes and red flags. First of all, if you think you need a tax attorney because you're serious about taxes but not in legal trouble, you don't need an attorney for that. I'm not saying an attorney can't help you, but you don't need an attorney about that. Again, a CPA or an EA who's a tax planner can help you. A very common mistake is assuming your CPA is doing strategy just because they file your return. Frankly, if you're lucky, they'll get after they do it, they'll say, "Hey, you could have saved some money if you did it this way instead." That's about the best you're going to get. It's a huge mistake and a red flag is getting any tax advice from someone who isn't a licensed professional at all. I am a libertarian anarchist. I don't believe in licensure, but there are a lot of scammers out there. So if you're watching YouTubers or getting stuff from MLM groups or, God forbid, the offshore trust peddlers or the you don't owe tax people at all, be really, really careful getting any sort of tax advice from those people because at least the fact that someone has a license means they have something to lose. They can be punished for it. And you can sue them for malpractice. They're going to typically have malpractice insurance if they're wrong. Whereas, if you listen to some YouTuber and follow him, well, you don't have a lot of recourse if he was wrong. Finally, a common mistake, not knowing what your current tax professional is actually doing. I've not been the best about this, but I've gotten better. I try to reach out to all my clients 3 or 4 times a year. Many of them I now have monthly meetings with, and we talk about what's going on. So the biggest mistake isn't hiring the wrong person. It's assuming someone is handling your strategy when they're not, or it's hiring the wrong person and assuming they're the right person. Make sure you know what you're getting and what you're not getting when you enter into the agreement. So what do? I am a tax attorney, but I do not advertise myself as a tax attorney because, again, I don't do litigation. I don't sue the IRS. The only time I would get involved in litigation with the IRS is if I had a client getting sued or audited by them. And frankly, I would probably go out and hire another attorney to help in that situation. I focus on planning. I help business owners and net worth individuals and high income individuals build tax strategies that save them real money and hold up if the IRS challenges them. Now, if you have a CPA or a bookkeeper or an existing team, I have no problem working with them. I want to work with them if they're people you trust. Because, again, most professionals just have a piece of the puzzle. I am not a good bookkeeper. I've done it for people, but frankly, a lot of that I'm beginning to outsource myself because it's not a good use of my time. My job is really to kind of help you see the big picture and maybe to help guide the overall team you have so you can save as much money as possible. Now, if you want to consult with me about saving money on your taxes, whether you're a high earning W-2 employee or a business owner, please reach out to me at agoristaxadvice.com/TSP. There you'll get my full Agorist tax toolkit. It has a number of useful tools, documents, and spreadsheets to help you actually save money, whether you're a business owner or an employee, as well as you'll get a link to schedule a call with me and see if we can help you out. Have a great year.